Maria Santos stepped off the military transport bus at Camp Harrison, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder and her chin held high despite the butterflies dancing in her stomach. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete parade ground, where dozens of new recruits were forming ragged lines under the watchful eyes of drill sergeants who looked like they could bench press small cars. At 22, Maria had spent her entire life proving herself. Growing up in a working-class family in San Antonio, she had watched her father struggle to make ends meet after losing his job at the auto plant. Her mother worked double shifts at the hospital, coming home exhausted but never complaining. Maria had earned a full academic scholarship to college, but when her father suffered a heart attack during her junior year, she made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. She enlisted, not because she had to, but because she wanted to serve something bigger than herself. Her professors begged her to reconsider. Her friends called her crazy. But Maria saw the military as a chance to develop leadership skills, gain real-world experience, and eventually become the kind of person who could make a difference in the world. Now, standing in formation with 49 other recruits, she wondered if she had made the right choice. "Listen up, maggots!" The voice belonged to Staff Sergeant Williams, a mountain of a man whose uniform looked like it had been ironed with military precision. His dark skin glistened with sweat, but his posture remained ramrod straight as he paced in front of the formation. "For the next 12 weeks, your sorry lives belong to me and my team of drill sergeants. We're going to break you down and build you back up into something that might eventually resemble soldiers." Maria kept her eyes forward, but she could feel the nervous energy radiating from the recruits around her. To her left stood Marcus Chun, a skinny kid from California who looked like a strong wind might knock him over. To her right was Jake Morrison, a farm boy from Iowa whose hands were already calloused from years of hard work. "Some of you think you're tough," Sergeant Williams continued, his voice carrying across the parade ground. "Some of you think you know what hard work means. I'm here to tell you that everything you thought you knew was wrong. This isn't summer camp. This isn't college. This is where we separate the wheat from the chaff." The sergeant's eyes swept across the formation, pausing briefly on each recruit. When his gaze fell on Maria, she felt a chill despite the Texas heat. There was something in his expression that went beyond the standard drill sergeant intimidation tactics she had read about online. "Now, when I call your name, you will sound off with here, Sergeant, and nothing else." "Santos, Maria." "Here's Sergeant." Maria's voice rang out clear and strong. Sergeant Williams stepped closer to her, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. Well, looks like we got ourselves a college girl. Tell me, Santos, what makes you think you can hang with the big boys?" The question was clearly designed to rattle her, but Maria had faced worse in college debate tournaments. "I'm here to serve my country and become the best soldier I can be, Sergeant." A few snickers rippled through the formation, quickly silenced by Williams's withering glare. "Is that so? We'll see about that, college girl. We'll see if you're still singing that tune when things get tough." The first week passed in a blur of early morning reveille calls, endless push-ups, and mind-numbing lectures about military protocol. Maria threw herself into every task with determination that impressed some of her fellow recruits and clearly annoyed others. She memorized the general orders faster than anyone in her platoon. Her bunk passed every inspection with flying colors. During PT, she kept pace with soldiers who had been athletes in high school. But it was during weapons training that Maria truly began to stand out. The M16 rifle felt natural in her hand from the first moment Sergeant Rodriguez, the weapons instructor, placed it there. Growing up, her grandfather had taken her hunting in the hill country outside San Antonio. He had taught her to shoot with an old .22 rifle, emphasizing safety, respect for the weapon, and the importance of precise aim. "Shooting isn't about being tough or aggressive," he used to tell her as they sat in deer blinds before dawn. "It's about patience, breathing, and understanding that every shot has consequences." Those lessons served her well on the firing range. While other recruits struggled to hit targets at 50 meters, Maria was consistently placing shots in tight groups at 100 meters and beyond. Her shooting scores were the highest in the company, a fact that did not go unnoticed by the drill sergeants. "Looks like our college girl knows which end of the rifle the bullets come out of," Sergeant Williams observed during one particularly successful range session. His tone was neutral, but Maria caught something in his eyes that made her uncomfortable. It was during the third week that the real problems began. Maria had just finished a late-night study session in the barracks, reviewing field manual procedures by flashlight under a blanket. Most of the other recruits were asleep, exhausted from a particularly brutal day of combat training exercises. She was heading to the latrine when she heard voices coming from the drill sergeant's office. "I'm telling you, Williams, that Santos girl is special," Sergeant Rodriguez was saying. "I've been training recruits for 8 years, and I've never seen natural shooting ability like that. She's got the instincts of someone who's been doing this for decades." "Special doesn't mean she belongs here," Williams replied, his voice carrying an edge that made Maria pause outside the door. "This isn't about who can shoot the prettiest groups on a static range. This is about who can handle real pressure when bullets are flying back at them. Come on, man. You've seen her PT scores, her academic performance. The girl's a natural leader. Leadership isn't about book smarts or being able to run fast," Williams shot back. "It's about making hard decisions when lives are on the line. And, sorry, but I don't see some college princess having what it takes when the chips are down." Maria felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. She had worked harder than anyone in the platoon, followed every order without complaint, and excelled in every area of training. Yet somehow, her college education had become a mark against her rather than an asset. The next morning brought hand-to-hand combat training, and Maria could sense that something had shifted. Williams paired her with Jake Morrison, the farm boy who outweighed her by at least 50 pounds. The exercise was supposed to teach basic grappling techniques and defensive maneuvers. "Remember, recruits," Williams announced to the assembled platoon, "combat isn't fair. Your enemy isn't going to care about your feelings or your background. They're going to try to kill you, and your job is to survive long enough to complete the mission." The exercise began simply enough. Maria and Jake circled each other on the practice mats, both wearing protective gear and following the prescribed movements they had learned. But as the session progressed, Williams kept increasing the intensity level. "Come on, Morrison. She's half your size. If you can't handle one little college girl, how are you going to face real enemies?" Jake's technique became more aggressive, his movements less controlled. Maria found herself working harder to defend against his attacks, but she held her own, using superior speed and technique to compensate for the size disadvantage. "Santos, stop dancing around like you're at some fancy cotillion. This is combat training, not a ballet recital." The insult stung, but Maria kept her focus on the exercise. She had learned long ago not to let emotions dictate her actions in competitive situations. When Jake lunged forward with a poorly executed takedown attempt, she sidestepped smoothly and used his momentum against him, sending him tumbling to the mat. The other recruits cheered, impressed by the move. But Williams wasn't finished. "Lucky shot, Santos. Let's see how you handle multiple opponents." This wasn't part of the standard training protocol, but no one questioned a drill sergeant's authority. Williams called over 2 more recruits, both larger than Maria, and reset the exercise. What followed was less training and more like a coordinated attack. The 3 male recruits came at her from different angles, their movements no longer following the control techniques they had been taught. Maria defended herself as best she could, but the numbers were against her. It was during one particularly intense moment that Jake grabbed her from behind while another recruit went for her legs. Maria tried to break free using a technique Sergeant Rodriguez had shown them the previous week, but Jake's grip was too strong. As she struggled, she felt herself losing balance. The throw happened so fast that no one was quite sure how it had occurred. One moment Maria was standing, fighting against 3 opponents in what had supposedly been a training exercise. The next moment, she was airborne, her body rotating as Jake's grip finally gave way. She hit the concrete floor outside the padded training area with a sickening thud that silenced the entire platoon. The impact drove the air from her lungs and sent sharp pain shooting through her left shoulder and ribs. For a moment, the world spun around her as she fought to breathe. "Santos, get up," Williams barked, but there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before. "Combat doesn't stop just because you fall down." Maria rolled on her side, gasping for air and fighting back tears of pain and humiliation. Every instinct told her to stay down, to accept that she had been beaten. But as she lay there on the cold concrete, she thought about her grandfather's words from those long-ago hunting trips. Mija, he had told her after she missed an easy shot, and through a tantrum, life is going to knock you down more times than you can count. The only thing that matters is whether you get back up. Slowly, painfully, Maria pushed herself to her feet. Her left arm hung uselessly at her side, and she could taste blood where she had bitten her tongue during the fall. But she stood, facing Williams with her chin raised and her eyes clear. The silence in the training area was deafening. Even Williams seemed momentarily at a loss for words as Maria stood there, swaying slightly, but refusing to give ground. "I'm ready to continue, Sergeant," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. Williams stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Around them, the other recruits watched with a mixture of admiration and concern. Finally, the drill sergeant spoke. "Training is over for today. Santos, report to the medic for evaluation." As Maria walked across the training area, her steps measured and deliberate despite her injuries, she could feel every pair of eyes in the platoon following her. Some looked at her with new respect. Others seemed concerned about what her refusal to back down might mean for all of them. But it was the expression on Sergeant Williams's face that stayed with her as she left the building. For just a moment, she had seen something flicker in his eyes that looked almost like surprise. The medic, a soft-spoken sergeant named Patterson, examined her injuries with professional thoroughness. 2 bruised ribs, a slightly separated shoulder, and multiple contusions, but nothing that would require serious medical intervention. "You're lucky," Patterson told her as he fitted her with a sling for her shoulder. "A fall like that could have been much worse." "It wasn't really a fall," Maria replied quietly. Patterson paused in his work, studying her face carefully. "You want to tell me what happened out there?" Maria considered her options. She could report what had happened, file a complaint about Williams's training methods. But she knew that would mark her as a troublemaker, someone who couldn't handle the pressure of military training. "Just training, Sergeant. I need to get better at defending against multiple opponents." Patterson finished adjusting her sling and stepped back. "Santos, I've been a medic for 12 years. I've seen training injuries, and I've seen other kinds of injuries. You sure there's nothing else you want to tell me?" For a moment, Maria was tempted. Patterson seemed genuinely concerned, and she sensed that he would listen to her story without judgment. But she thought about her goals, about why she had enlisted in the first place. She hadn't come here to file complaints or look for special treatment. "I'm sure, Sergeant. Just need to get stronger." That evening, as Maria sat on her bunk writing a letter to her parents, Marcus Chun approached her hesitantly. "Hey, Maria, how are you feeling?" "Fine," she replied, not looking up from her letter. "Just a few bumps and bruises." Marcus sat down on the foot of her bunk, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "Look what happened today. That wasn't normal training. Jake and those other guys, they were really going after you." Maria finally looked up from her letter. Marcus's face was earnest and concerned, and she realized that he had probably spent considerable courage working up to this conversation. "Marcus, we're all here to learn how to be soldiers. Sometimes training is intense, but it shouldn't be personal," Marcus insisted. "Williams has had it out for you since day one. Everyone can see it." Before Maria could respond, Jake Morrison appeared at the foot of her bunk. The big farm boy looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot as he struggled to find words. "Maria, I wanted to apologize for today. Things got out of hand, and I shouldn't have grabbed you like that." Maria studied his face, trying to read his intentions. Jake had always been one of the quieter recruits, focused on his training and not prone to unnecessary drama. "It's fine, Jake. We were following orders." "No, it wasn't fine," Jake replied firmly. "I've been in enough farm accidents to know the difference between training and someone getting hurt for real. What happened today crossed the line." The conversation was interrupted by the sharp blast of a whistle from the drill sergeant's area. "Lights out in 5 minutes." Sergeant Williams's voice boomed across the barracks. As Marcus and Jake returned to their bunks, Maria finished her letter home. She wrote about the challenging training, the new friends she was making, and her growing confidence in her abilities. She didn't mention the pain in her shoulder or the humiliation of being thrown to the floor in front of the entire platoon. But as she lay in her bunk that night, staring at the ceiling while the other recruits settled into sleep around her, Maria made a decision. She wouldn't quit. She wouldn't complain. She wouldn't give Williams or anyone else the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she would get better, stronger, faster. She would prove that her college education had taught her more than just book learning. She would show them all that determination and intelligence could overcome physical disadvantages. And if Williams wanted to make her training personal, she was ready for that challenge too. The next morning brought another early reveille call, another day of intense training, another opportunity to prove herself. As Maria laced up her combat boots, favoring her injured shoulder but refusing to show weakness, she thought about something her grandfather had told her during one of their last hunting trips together. "Mija, some people are going to try to tell you that you don't belong in certain places, that you're not tough enough or strong enough or good enough. When that happens, you have two choices. You can believe them and walk away, or you can prove them wrong." Maria Santos had no intention of walking away. Outside, she could hear Sergeant Williams's voice calling the platoon to formation. She grabbed her gear, squared her shoulders despite the pain, and headed out to face whatever challenges the day would bring. She had 12 weeks of basic training ahead of her, and she intended to graduate at the top of her class. Not despite Williams's hostility, but because of it. Every unfair exercise, every personal insult, every attempt to break her spirit would only make her more determined to succeed. As she took her place in formation, Maria caught Williams's eye across the parade ground. For a moment, their gazes locked, and she saw something that might have been respect flicker in the drill sergeant's expression. Or maybe it was just the beginning of a deeper challenge. Either way, she was ready. The weeks following the incident in the training room brought a subtle but unmistakable shift in the dynamics of Bravo Company. Williams continued to single Maria out during training, but now his challenges seemed less about breaking her spirit and more about testing the limits of her abilities. She responded by throwing herself into every aspect of military training with an intensity that impressed even the most skeptical of her fellow recruits. Her injured shoulder healed faster than expected, aided by the physical therapy exercises Sergeant Patterson had prescribed and Maria's own determination to regain full strength. During PT sessions, she pushed herself beyond the minimum requirements, running extra laps after the official workout was complete and spending her free time practicing the combat techniques that had initially given her trouble. But it was during advanced marksmanship training that Maria truly began to separate herself from the pack. The morning started like any other range day, with recruits filing out to the firing line, carrying their assigned weapons and ammunition. But instead of the standard M16 rifles they had been using, this session introduced them to the M24 sniper weapon system, a precision rifle that would challenge even experienced marksmen. "Today we're going to see who among you has the patience and skill for precision shooting," announced Sergeant Rodriguez as he stood before the assembled platoon. Sniping isn't about spraying bullets and hoping for the best. It requires discipline, mathematical thinking, and the ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. Maria felt a familiar excitement as Rodriguez demonstrated the proper handling of the precision rifle. The weapon was heavier than the standard assault rifle, with a high-powered scope and adjustable stock that could be customized for individual shooters. As Rodriguez explained the fundamentals of long-range shooting, Maria found herself thinking about those early morning hunting trips with her grandfather. Mija, shooting at long distance is like solving a puzzle, he had told her as they sat in the hunting blind, waiting for dawn to break over the Texas hills. You have to calculate wind speed, distance, elevation, even the rotation of the earth. But most importantly, you have to control your breathing and your heartbeat. The rifle will only be as steady as the person holding it. When her turn came to approach the firing line, Maria settled into the prone position with the confidence of someone who had spent countless hours in similar positions. The 300-meter target seemed impossibly small through the scope, but as she adjusted for wind and elevation, the fundamentals her grandfather had taught her came flooding back. The first shot was a bullseye. The second shot was a bullseye. By the time she had fired her 10th round, a small crowd of drill sergeants had gathered behind the firing line to observe her performance. Maria was aware of their presence, but refused to let it break her concentration. Each shot was deliberate, calculated, and precise. "Cease fire," Rodriguez called out as the session concluded. "Santos, front and center." Maria cleared her weapon and approached the sergeant, her expression neutral despite the excitement she felt inside. Rodriguez held her target in his hands, studying the tight group of shots clustered around the center ring. "Santos, where did you learn to shoot like this?" "My grandfather taught me basic marksmanship when I was younger, Sergeant." Rodriguez looked from the target to Maria and back again. "Basic marksmanship? Santos, you just shot expert-level scores with a weapon you've never fired before. This isn't basic anything." From behind the group of observing drill sergeants, Sergeant Williams stepped forward. His expression was unreadable as he examined Maria's target. "Rodriguez is right, Santos. These scores are exceptional." Williams paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "How do you feel about a little extra training?" The question caught Maria off guard. After weeks of antagonistic interactions, Williams's offer of additional training felt like stepping into unknown territory. "I'm always interested in improving my skills, Sergeant." "Good. Starting tomorrow, you'll report to the Advanced Marksmanship course during your free time. Staff Sergeant Murphy runs a program for soldiers who show exceptional aptitude with precision weapons." As Maria returned to the barracks that evening, she found herself wondering about Williams's sudden change in attitude. Jake Morrison, who had become something of a friend despite their rough introduction, expressed similar confusion. "I don't get it," Jake said as they cleaned their weapons after chow. 3 weeks ago, Williams was trying to get you to quit. Now he's recommending you for advanced training. Maybe he's finally realizing that I'm serious about being here," Maria replied, running a cleaning rod through her rifle barrel. "Or maybe he's setting you up for something." Marcus Chun chimed in from his nearby bunk. "My dad always told me to be suspicious when someone who doesn't like you suddenly starts doing you favors." That night, as Maria lay in her bunk reviewing the technical manual for advanced marksmanship, she found herself thinking about Marcus's warning. There was definitely something different about Williams's recent behavior, but she couldn't determine whether it represented genuine recognition of her abilities or simply a more sophisticated form of harassment. Her questions were answered the following morning when she reported to Staff Sergeant Murphy's advanced marksmanship course. Murphy was a 20-year veteran whose reputation as a sniper instructor was legendary throughout the base. Unlike the drill sergeants who ran basic training, Murphy spoke in measured tones and treated his students more like junior colleagues than wayward children. "Santos, I've reviewed your range scores from yesterday," Murphy said as Maria stood at attention in his office. "Sergeant Williams tells me you might be interested in learning some more advanced techniques." "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Murphy gestured for her to take a seat, an informality that felt strange after weeks of rigid military protocol. "Tell me about your shooting background." For the next 20 minutes, Maria described her experiences hunting with her grandfather, the techniques he had taught her, and her natural affinity for precision shooting. Murphy listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. "Your grandfather sounds like he was a wise man," Murphy said when she finished. "The fundamentals he taught you are solid, but there's a big difference between hunting deer and what we do in the military. Are you prepared for that reality?" Maria considered the question carefully. She understood that military sniping involved more than just accurate shooting, but she wasn't entirely sure what Murphy was asking. "I think so, Staff Sergeant. I understand that military marksmanship serves a different purpose than hunting." Murphy studied her face for a long moment. "Santos, I'm going to be direct with you. Sergeant Williams didn't recommend you for this program because he thinks you need extra training. He recommended you because he believes you might have the potential to become a military sniper. Do you understand what that means?" The weight of Murphy's words settled over Maria like a heavy blanket. Military snipers weren't just skilled marksmen. They were elite soldiers who operated in the most dangerous and demanding environments the military had to offer. "I understand the responsibility that would entail, Staff Sergeant." "Do you?" "Because being a sniper isn't about hitting targets on a range. It's about making life and death decisions under extreme pressure. It's about patience, discipline, and the mental fortitude to function effectively in situations that would break most people." Murphy stood and moved to a window that overlooked the main training area. Maria could see her fellow recruits conducting drill exercises in the distance. "I've been training snipers for 15 years, Santos. I've seen soldiers with incredible natural ability wash out because they couldn't handle the psychological pressure. I've seen others succeed despite mediocre marksmanship skills because they had the right mental makeup. The question is, which category do you fall into? I'd like the opportunity to find out, Staff Sergeant." Murphy turned back to face her, and Maria caught something in his expression that reminded her of her grandfather's look of quiet approval when she had made a particularly difficult shot. "All right, Santos. We'll start with advanced ballistics and range estimation. But I want you to understand something. If you commit to this path, there's no going back to regular infantry training. Snipers are held to different standards, given different responsibilities, and expected to perform at levels that most soldiers never reach. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want?" Maria thought about everything that had led her to this moment. Her decision to enlist despite having other options, the challenges Williams had thrown at her, the incident in the training room that had nearly broken her spirit, and the gradual realization that she possessed abilities that set her apart from her peers. "Yes, Staff Sergeant, I'm certain." The advanced marksmanship training that followed was unlike anything Maria had experienced during basic training. Where drill sergeants relied on intimidation and high-pressure tactics, Murphy emphasized patience, precision, and intellectual understanding of complex concepts. Each morning before regular training began, Maria would report to Murphy's classroom for instruction in advanced ballistics, weather reading, and range estimation. She learned to calculate bullet drop over various distances, account for wind drift and atmospheric pressure, and use mathematical formulas to compensate for environmental factors that could affect shot placement. The academic material came naturally to her, drawing on the analytical thinking skills she had developed during college. But it was the practical application of these concepts that truly excited her. During range sessions, Murphy would set up increasingly challenging scenarios that tested not just her shooting accuracy, but her ability to think tactically under pressure. She learned to estimate distances without the aid of electronic equipment, read wind patterns by observing grass movement and mirage effects, and make rapid calculations that would allow her to engage targets at ranges that seemed impossible. "Distance to target?" Murphy would call out as Maria settled into a shooting position. 640 meters, Staff Sergeant. "Wind speed and direction?" 8 miles per hour, quartering from the left. "Adjustment. 2 minutes left, 3 minutes up. Engage." The shot would ring out, and more often than not, the target would show the impact of a precisely placed round. Maria's scores continued to improve week after week, and she began to understand why Williams had recommended her for the program. But it wasn't just the technical skills that set her apart. Murphy had been right about the mental aspects of precision shooting. During stress exercises, when Murphy would create distractions or impose time limits, Maria found that her college experience had taught her how to maintain focus under pressure. The other recruits in her regular training platoon began to notice her absence during certain training periods, and rumors started to circulate about her special instruction. Some expressed admiration for her selection to advanced training, while others grumbled about perceived favoritism. It was during the 8th week of basic training that the situation came to a head. Maria had just returned from an afternoon session with Murphy when she found her bunk area in disarray. Her carefully folded uniforms had been scattered across the floor, her personal letters had been torn open and read, and someone had written "Sniper Princess" across her wall locker in permanent marker. The barracks fell silent as Maria surveyed the damage to her personal area. She could feel every set of eyes in the platoon watching her reaction, waiting to see if this latest provocation would finally break her composure. "Anybody want to tell me what happened here?" Maria asked, her voice calm despite the anger building inside her. The silence stretched on until Jake Morrison stepped forward from his bunk area. "Some guys thought you were getting special treatment. They figured you needed to be brought down a few pegs." "I see." "And who exactly decided that my personal property needed to be destroyed?" Jake shifted uncomfortably, clearly torn between loyalty to his fellow male recruits and his growing respect for Maria. "Look, Maria, it wasn't personal. Some people just think that all this sniper training is going to your head." Maria began picking up her scattered belongings, folding each item with the same precision she had learned to apply to her marksmanship. As she worked, she spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the barracks. "Let me make something clear to everyone in this platoon. I didn't ask for special treatment. I earned advanced training through performance, just like any of you could if you put in the effort. If anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly instead of destroying my property like children." She stood and faced the assembled recruits, her eyes moving from face to face until she had made eye contact with every person in the room. "But here's what I want you all to understand. In a few weeks, we're going to graduate from this place and become real soldiers. When that happens, the person next to you might be the only thing standing between you and a bullet. I don't care if you like me, respect me, or think I deserve to be here. But I'll be damned if I'm going to let petty jealousy and playground politics compromise the effectiveness of this unit." The barracks remained silent as Maria finished cleaning up the mess and began preparing her gear for the next day's training. But as she worked, she noticed that several of the other recruits had begun helping, quietly returning scattered items and straightening her area. Marcus Chun was the first to speak. "Maria's right. We're supposed to be on the same team here." Jake Morrison nodded slowly. "Yeah, this was stupid. I should have stopped it before it went this far." One by one, other recruits began expressing similar sentiments. Even some who had participated in the vandalism seemed genuinely remorseful about their actions. The incident had forced everyone in the platoon to confront the reality that their personal conflicts were undermining their collective mission. But as Maria prepared for bed that night, she remained troubled by the knowledge that not everyone in the barracks had been convinced by her words. She could sense an undercurrent of resentment from a small group of recruits who viewed her success as somehow diminishing their own accomplishments. The next morning brought the most challenging training exercise of their basic training experience, a 3-day field exercise that would test everything they had learned about tactics, survival, and teamwork. Maria approached the exercise with mixed emotions, excited about the opportunity to apply her developing skills, but concerned about how the previous night's confrontation might affect unit cohesion. As the platoon prepared to move out to the training area, Sergeant Williams approached Maria with an expression that was difficult to read. "Santos, I heard about the incident in the barracks last night." "Yes, Sergeant. It's been resolved." Williams studied her face carefully. "Has it? Because where we're going for this exercise, personality conflicts can get people killed. I need to know that you can count on every person in this platoon and that they can count on you." Maria thought about the question seriously. Despite the vandalism of her personal area, she genuinely believed that most of her fellow recruits would support her in a crisis situation. But there were still a few whose loyalty remained questionable. "I believe most of the platoon will function effectively as a unit, Sergeant." "Most isn't good enough, Santos. In combat, you need to be able to trust everyone completely, or the entire mission falls apart." As Williams walked away to address other aspects of the exercise preparation, Maria reflected on his words. She had focused so intently on proving herself individually that she had perhaps lost sight of the larger goal of unit cohesion. The field exercise would provide the perfect opportunity to address that oversight. The training scenario was designed to simulate a reconnaissance mission in hostile territory. The platoon would have to navigate through unfamiliar terrain, establish observation posts, and gather intelligence while avoiding enemy patrols played by advanced training units. Maria's sniper training gave her a significant advantage in this environment. Her enhanced skills at range estimation, camouflage, and patient observation made her invaluable for reconnaissance tasks. But rather than trying to dominate the exercise with her superior abilities, she made a conscious effort to share her knowledge and support her fellow recruits. When Marcus Chun struggled with map reading in low-light conditions, Maria quietly showed him techniques for using landmarks and terrain features to maintain orientation. When Jake Morrison had difficulty estimating ranges for the platoon's mock artillery calls, Maria helped him understand the mathematical principles involved. Her efforts to build unit cohesion were put to the ultimate test on the second day of the exercise, when the platoon found itself facing a scenario that went beyond the planned training parameters. They had established an observation post on a hilltop overlooking a valley where they were supposed to monitor simulated enemy movements. Maria was serving as the platoon's designated marksman, using her precision shooting skills to gather intelligence on distant targets. It was during a routine surveillance sweep that she noticed something that made her blood run cold. In the distance, barely visible through her powerful spotting scope, she could see what appeared to be an actual emergency situation unfolding. A civilian vehicle had crashed on a remote road outside the training area, and smoke was beginning to rise from the wreckage. "Sergeant Williams," Maria called out quietly, not wanting to break operational security, but knowing that immediate action was required. "We have a real-world situation developing." Williams moved to her position and took the spotting scope. After a moment of observation, his expression became grim. "That's outside our training area," he said quietly. "But it looks like someone might need help." The situation presented a complex challenge that went beyond anything covered in their training manuals. They were supposed to maintain their observation post and continue the exercise, but there was a very real possibility that people were in danger just beyond their training boundaries. Williams made the decision that would define not just the exercise, but the character of the entire platoon. "Santos, can you determine if there are any casualties from this position?" Maria adjusted her scope and studied the crash scene carefully. Through the smoke and distance, she could make out movement that suggested at least one person had survived the crash and was attempting to exit the vehicle. "Affirmative, Sergeant. I can see at least one person moving around the vehicle, but they appear to be injured." Williams keyed his radio and began coordinating with higher headquarters to request emergency medical support for the crash scene. While he handled the communications, Maria continued to provide real-time intelligence about the situation, using her enhanced observation skills to guide the response efforts. Within minutes, emergency vehicles were racing toward the crash site, guided by the precise location information Maria was able to provide through her observation post. As the rescue unfolded in the distance, the entire platoon watched with a mixture of admiration and pride as their training was applied to a real-world emergency. The incident marked a turning point in the platoon's dynamics. Maria's technical skills had proven valuable not just for military applications, but for saving civilian lives. More importantly, her willingness to share her knowledge and support her fellow recruits had transformed potential resentment into genuine respect. That evening, as the platoon sat around their field positions discussing the day's events, Jake Morrison approached Maria with an expression of sincere gratitude. "Maria, I owe you an apology. Not just for the stuff that happened in the barracks, but for not recognizing what kind of person you really are. We're all learning, Jake. That's what this is about. No, it's more than that. Today showed me that your special training isn't about getting privileges or showing off. You're developing skills that can make a real difference when it matters." Similar conversations took place throughout the evening as other recruits expressed their newfound appreciation for Maria's abilities and character. The vandalism incident that had threatened to divide the platoon had instead created an opportunity for growth and understanding. As Maria settled into her sleeping bag that night, she reflected on how much had changed since that first day when Williams had called her out as college girl. She had proven herself not just as an individual soldier, but as a leader who could inspire and support others. But she also understood that her journey was far from over. Basic training was coming to an end, and soon she would face even greater challenges as she continued her military career. The real test was still ahead. Graduation day arrived with the crisp clarity of a Texas morning that seemed to promise new beginnings. As Maria stood in formation with her fellow soldiers, she barely recognized the nervous college student who had stepped off the bus 12 weeks earlier. The transformation went deeper than the perfectly pressed uniform and the confident bearing she now carried. Something fundamental had changed inside her. The ceremony proceeded with military precision, families filling the bleachers as drill sergeants called out names and handed out certificates. When Sergeant Williams called Private Santos Maria, she stepped forward with pride swelling in her chest. But it was the moment after receiving her certificate that truly marked her achievement. "Outstanding graduate," Williams announced, and Maria felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Private Santos has demonstrated exceptional performance in all areas of training and will be continuing on to advanced individual training for military occupational specialty 11B40 sniper. The applause from her platoon was thunderous, led by Jake Morrison and Marcus Chun, who had become her strongest supporters. As Maria returned to formation, she caught Williams's eye and saw something there that had been absent during those first difficult weeks: genuine respect. After the ceremony, as families mingled with their newly graduated soldiers, Maria found herself approached by a woman in civilian clothes whose bearing suggested military experience. "Private Santos, I'm Major Patricia Reeves, and I wanted to speak with you about your next assignment." Maria snapped to attention. "Ma'am, at ease, Private. Walk with me." They moved away from the crowd to a quieter area of the parade ground. Major Reeves was a woman in her early 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Staff Sergeant Murphy speaks very highly of your potential, Santos. Your scores in advanced marksmanship training are some of the highest he's recorded in 15 years of instruction." "Thank you, ma'am. Staff Sergeant Murphy is an excellent instructor." "He is indeed, which is why I'm here to discuss your future training opportunities. How familiar are you with the Army Sniper School?" Maria's heart began racing. Army Sniper School was the pinnacle of military marksmanship training, producing the elite soldiers who served as precision shooters in the most demanding combat environments. "I understand it's extremely challenging and selective, ma'am." "That's an understatement, Private. The course has a graduation rate of less than 60%, and those who do graduate are among the most highly trained soldiers in the military. But based on your performance here and Murphy's recommendation, you're being offered a slot in the next class." The offer was everything Maria had hoped for, but hadn't dared to expect so soon. Sniper School represented years of additional training and the opportunity to develop skills that would set her apart as an elite soldier. "I'm honored by the opportunity, ma'am, and I accept." Major Reeves smiled for the first time during their conversation. "Good. But, Santos, I want you to understand what you're committing to. Sniper school isn't just about shooting accurately. You'll learn advanced fieldcraft, survival techniques, urban warfare tactics, and psychological operations. You'll be pushed to limits you didn't know existed, and you'll be expected to perform at standards that would challenge soldiers with years of combat experience. I understand, ma'am. Do you? Because the biggest challenge won't be the physical or technical demands. It will be learning to make life and death decisions under extreme pressure. Snipers often operate alone or in small teams, hundreds of miles from support, in situations where a single mistake can compromise an entire mission or cost lives. Maria thought about Major Reeves's words as she packed her belongings later that evening. The woman's warning echoed similar concerns that Staff Sergeant Murphy had expressed during her advanced training. Being a sniper meant accepting a level of responsibility that went far beyond anything she had experienced in civilian life. But as she folded her uniforms and prepared for the next phase of her military career, Maria felt a sense of purpose that had been building since that first day when Sergeant Williams had tried to break her spirit. Every challenge, every setback, every moment of doubt had led to this opportunity. Her parents arrived for graduation with expressions of pride and concern in equal measure. They had watched their daughter transform from a college student into a soldier, but they still struggled to understand her decision to pursue such a dangerous military specialty. "Mija, are you sure this is what you want?" her mother asked as they shared dinner at a restaurant near the base. "You have so many other options." "Mama, this is exactly what I want. I found something I'm truly good at, something that can make a difference." Her father, who had remained quiet during most of the conversation, finally spoke up. "Your grandfather would be proud of you. He always said you had the patience and precision for long-range shooting. He taught me more than just marksmanship, Papa. He taught me about responsibility, patience, and the importance of never taking a shot unless you're certain of the consequences." The next morning brought tearful goodbyes and promises to write regularly. As Maria boarded the transport to Fort Benning, Georgia, where sniper school was conducted, she carried with her the lessons learned during basic training and the confidence that came from overcoming seemingly impossible challenges. Fort Benning was unlike the training facility where she had completed basic training. The atmosphere was more serious, the standards more demanding, and the instructors carried themselves with the quiet confidence of soldiers who had proven themselves in actual combat. Maria's class consisted of 24 soldiers, all of whom had demonstrated exceptional marksmanship skills during their initial training. But as she looked around at her fellow students during the first formation, she realized that she was not only the youngest person in the group, but also one of only 3 women. The lead instructor was Sergeant First Class David Chun, a veteran of multiple combat deployments whose reputation for excellence was legendary throughout the sniper community. Unlike the drill sergeants from basic training, Chun spoke in measured tones and treated his students as professional soldiers rather than recruits. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the United States Army Sniper School. Over the next 8 weeks, you will learn skills that have been developed and refined through decades of combat experience. Some of you will graduate and join the ranks of military snipers who serve around the world. Others will return to regular infantry units with a deeper appreciation for the complexity of precision warfare." Chin paused and made eye contact with each student in turn. "The difference between these 2 outcomes will be determined not by your natural shooting ability, which brought you here, but by your mental toughness, attention to detail, and ability to think tactically under extreme stress." The first week of instruction focused on advanced ballistics and environmental factors that affected long-range shooting. Maria found herself drawing heavily on the foundation that Staff Sergeant Murphy had provided during basic training, but the complexity of the material at sniper school was far beyond anything she had encountered before. Students learned to calculate bullet trajectories out to ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, accounting for factors including air density, temperature variations, humidity levels, and even the Coriolis effect caused by the Earth's rotation. The mathematical calculations required for precision shooting at extreme distances were complex enough to challenge soldiers with engineering backgrounds. But it was during the fieldcraft portion of training that Maria truly began to understand the full scope of sniper responsibilities. Students learned to move through various terrain types without detection, construct camouflage positions that could conceal them for days at a time, and observe enemy positions while remaining completely invisible. The ghillie suit construction exercise pushed every student to their creative and physical limits. Using natural materials gathered from the local environment, they had to create camouflage clothing that would allow them to blend seamlessly with their surroundings. Maria spent hours weaving grass, leaves, and fabric strips into a suit that would make her nearly invisible in woodland environments. "Santos, your ghillie work is exceptional," Sergeant Chin observed during one training exercise. "You have an intuitive understanding of how natural patterns work to break up human silhouettes." The compliment meant more to Maria than any academic achievement from her college years. Creating effective camouflage required a combination of artistic sensibility, technical knowledge, and practical experience that few people could master. But the true test of sniper training came during the stalking exercises that required students to move undetected across open ground while being actively hunted by instructors with high-powered optics. The exercise simulated the real-world challenges that snipers faced when attempting to reach firing positions in hostile territory. Maria's first stalking attempt was a complete failure. Despite her carefully constructed ghillie suit and hours of planning, she was spotted by instructors before reaching even halfway to her target position. The feedback was humbling but educational. "Santos, you're thinking like a target shooter instead of a battlefield sniper," Sergeant Chin explained during the after-action review. "Target shooters move in straight lines and focus on mechanical precision. Snipers have to think in 3 dimensions, using terrain features, light patterns, and timing to remain undetected." The criticism stung, but Maria absorbed the lessons and applied them to her next attempt. Instead of focusing solely on camouflage, she began thinking about the psychological aspects of concealment. How would an observer scan the terrain? What patterns would draw attention? How could she use the expectations and limitations of human vision to her advantage? Her second stalking exercise was a marked improvement, and by the 4th week of training, Maria was consistently reaching her assigned positions without detection. The transformation from basic marksman to tactical thinker was gradual but unmistakable. It was during the urban warfare phase of training that Maria faced her most challenging test yet. The scenario involved engaging targets in a populated area where civilian casualties had to be avoided at all costs. Students were required to identify legitimate military targets while protecting innocent bystanders, often making split-second decisions under intense time pressure. The exercise took place in a mock city constructed specifically for military training, complete with multi-story buildings, busy streets, and civilian actors who played the roles of non-combatants. Maria found herself positioned on a rooftop overlooking a complex scene where enemy soldiers were intermixed with innocent civilians. "Target acquisition," the exercise controller announced through her radio earpiece. "Multiple hostiles have taken civilians hostage in the building complex to your front. Positive identification required before engagement." Through her powerful rifle scope, Maria could see figures moving through the windows of buildings several hundred meters away. Some carried weapons that clearly identified them as military targets, but others were dressed as civilians and their status was ambiguous. The complexity of the scenario was intentionally overwhelming. Students had to process multiple streams of information simultaneously while maintaining the precision and patience required for accurate long-range shooting. Many of her classmates became flustered by the conflicting demands and made mistakes that would have resulted in civilian casualties in a real-world situation. But Maria found that her college experience with complex analytical thinking served her well in this environment. She had learned to break down complicated problems into manageable components prioritize information based on importance, and make reasoned decisions under time pressure. Hostile target identified, she reported quietly into her radio. Adult male, armed with assault rifle, positioned in third-floor window of Building 2. Clear shot available with no civilian interference. Engage when ready, came the response. Maria controlled her breathing and settled into the familiar routine that had become second nature during months of training. The mathematical calculations for wind, distance, and elevation were automatic now, processed by her subconscious, while her conscious mind focused on the ethical and tactical aspects of the shot. The trigger squeeze was smooth and deliberate, sending a training round precisely to its intended target. The exercise controller confirmed the hit and marked it as a clean engagement with no collateral damage. Outstanding work, Santos, Sergeant Chin's voice crackled through her earpiece. Textbook target identification and engagement sequence. But as Maria cleared her weapon and prepared to move to the next firing position, she found herself thinking about the implications of what she had just accomplished. In a real combat situation, that training round would have ended someone's life. The weight of that responsibility was something no amount of training could fully prepare her for. The final phase of sniper school combined all the skills students had learned into a comprehensive field exercise that lasted 5 days and tested every aspect of their training. Working in two-person teams, students had to infiltrate a hostile area, establish concealed observation posts, gather intelligence on enemy activities, and engage selected targets while avoiding detection by opposition forces. Maria was paired with Staff Sergeant Amanda Walsh, a veteran soldier whose calm professionalism complemented Maria's analytical approach to complex problems. Together, they spent hours planning their approach to the exercise area, studying maps and aerial photographs to identify potential routes and firing positions. The exercise began before dawn on a Monday morning, with teams inserting into the training area under cover of darkness. Maria and Walsh carried everything they would need for 5 days of independent operations, including food, water, ammunition, and sophisticated communication equipment. Their first objective was to reach an observation post overlooking a simulated enemy command center where they would gather intelligence on personnel movements and communication patterns. The position required a 3-kilometer movement through heavily patrolled terrain, followed by the construction of a camouflaged hide site that could conceal both soldiers for extended periods. The movement phase tested every aspect of fieldcraft that Maria had learned during training. She and Walsh moved like ghosts through the pre-dawn darkness, using natural terrain features to avoid detection while making steady progress toward their objective. When opposition patrols came too close, they would freeze in place and rely on their camouflage and discipline to remain undetected. It took them 6 hours to reach their assigned position, but when they arrived, they immediately began the painstaking process of constructing a hide site that would allow them to observe the target area while remaining completely invisible to enemy searches. Using skills learned during the ghillie suit construction exercises, they wove natural vegetation into a camouflage shelter that blended seamlessly with the surrounding environment. The hide site was large enough to accommodate both soldiers and their equipment while providing clear observation and firing lanes toward their target. For the next 3 days, Maria and Walsh maintained continuous observation of the simulated enemy facility, documenting personnel movements, identifying key leadership figures, and reporting intelligence through encrypted radio communications. The work required intense concentration and patience, qualities that Maria had developed during her hunting trips with her grandfather, but had never applied in such demanding circumstances. On the 4th day of the exercise, they received orders to engage a high-value target who would be visiting the enemy command post. The shot would be challenging, requiring precise calculation of range, wind, and elevation at a distance of nearly 800 meters. Maria spent hours preparing for the engagement, studying the target area through her spotting scope and calculating the environmental factors that would affect bullet trajectory. When the target finally appeared, She had less than 30 seconds to complete the engagement before he moved to a position that would make the shot impossible. Target acquired, Walsh whispered, serving as Maria's spotter. Range 820 meters. Wind 3 to 5 miles per hour, quartering from the right. Maria made the final adjustments to her rifle scope and settled into her shooting position. Through the powerful optic, she could see the target clearly as he moved across an open area between buildings. The shot would require perfect timing and execution. Send it, Walsh whispered. The shot felt perfect from the moment Maria pressed the trigger. She could sense the rifle's recoil and recovery, the smooth follow-through that indicated proper technique. Through her scope, she watched the training round impact exactly where she had aimed. Target down, Walsh confirmed. Clean hit, center mass. The successful engagement marked the completion of their primary mission, but the exercise wasn't over yet. They still had to extract from their position and reach a predetermined pickup point without being detected by the opposing forces who would be actively searching for them. The extraction phase proved to be even more challenging than the insertion. Enemy patrols were now actively hunting for the sniper team responsible for eliminating their high-value target, and Maria and Walsh had to use every concealment technique they had learned to avoid capture. They moved primarily during hours of darkness, covering their tracks carefully and taking advantage of weather conditions that limited visibility for their pursuers. When they finally reached the extraction point after 2 days of careful movement, Maria felt a sense of accomplishment that surpassed anything she had experienced during basic training. The graduation ceremony at sniper school was a subdued affair compared to the pageantry of basic training. Only 16 of the original 24 students had successfully completed all phases of training, and those who graduated understood that their real education was just beginning. As Maria received her sniper qualification badge and certificate, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the college student who had enlisted against the advice of her professors to the elite soldier who now wore the crossed rifle's insignia of a qualified sniper, she had been transformed in ways that went far beyond military training. Private Santos, Sergeant Chun said as he handed her the certificate, "You've demonstrated exceptional performance throughout this course. Your combination of technical skill and tactical thinking makes you exactly the kind of soldier the sniper community needs." "Thank you, Sergeant. I'm honored to be part of the community. Your training isn't over, Santos. It's just beginning." Real competence comes from years of experience applying these skills in actual operational environments. Stay humble, keep learning, and never forget that every shot you take carries consequences that extend far beyond the target. That evening, as Maria packed her belongings and prepared for her first assignment to an operational unit, she reflected on Chen's words. She had achieved her goal of completing sniper school, but she understood that graduation was really just the beginning of her journey as a professional soldier. Her first assignment would take her to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where she would join the legendary 101st Airborne Division as part of a reconnaissance unit that deployed regularly to combat zones around the world. The prospect was both exciting and sobering, representing the culmination of everything she had worked toward, but also the beginning of responsibilities she was only beginning to understand. As she walked across the Fort Benning parade ground for the last time as a student, Maria thought about the person she had been when Sergeant Williams first threw her to the floor during basic training. That incident had seemed like a devastating setback at the time, but it had actually been the beginning of a transformation that had revealed capabilities she never knew she possessed. The young woman who had once doubted whether she belonged in the military had become a soldier qualified to serve in one of its most elite specialties. She had proven herself not just as an individual, but as a leader who could inspire others and make difficult decisions under extreme pressure. But perhaps most importantly, she had learned that true strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up, learning from the experience, and using that knowledge to become better than you were before. The teenage girl who had learned patience and precision during hunting trips with her grandfather had grown into a soldier whose skills could protect innocent lives and serve her country's interests around the world. As she prepared for the next chapter of her military career, Maria Santos carried with her the confidence that came from knowing she had earned her place among America's elite warriors through dedication, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. The transformation was complete, but the mission was just beginning.